Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Juan Moore. I'm the Regional Director for our Future Florida. And today we're going to have an honest discussion about and around George Floyd and the anniversary of George Floyd and the Policing Act. And we do have some a great coalition of partners that are joining us today. We want to welcome Black Lives Matter Alliance of Broward, and also Equal Ground, and also Girls with Scars. Momentarily, I'll give them time to share who they are and organizationally and what they do. But before we start, I want to give a brief trigger that some of what we talk about today may trigger those. However, we never intend to offend anybody. We always intend to have an honest discussion of progressive values that could activate you as a viewer, and you as the voter, you as a citizen, you as just a person, and enable you to have a voice. And so that being said, we're going to open up our discussion. But first, I want to talk to the panel, have them introduce themselves to you guys. So hello, how you guys feeling? I'll go ahead and throw the mic over to David Bonilla. Hey, David, how's it going?
Hey, Juan, doing really good. Really glad to be a part of this panel as well. I'm David Bonilla. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm in the Central Florida region. I'm actually just outside of Orlando. So really glad to be a part of this statewide coalition of people joined together for this discussion today.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And we're joined by Bernice for our future of West Central. Hey, Bernice, how's it going?
Hey, everyone. So excited to be on tonight. I'm Bernice. I'm the Regional Director in West Central Florida. So shout out to Tampa and St. Pete. Super excited for this call. I think we're going to have a really rich discussion, and I'm really grateful to the organizations that could be on tonight. So thank you so much, Equal Ground, Girls with Scars, and BLM Broward Alliance.
For sure. Thanks, Bernice. Hey, Equal Ground, how you doing out there?
Hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Genesis. I am the Regional Coordinator for Equal Ground. I'm located here in Volusia County. And Equal Ground is a political nonprofit. We specialize in expanding the electorate and building political power in Black and Brown communities. And so I'm excited to be here with you all tonight to have this discussion and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much. Hey, and Tiffany, how's it going, Tiffany?
It's going pretty good. Hi, everybody. Tiffany, my pronouns are they and she. And I'm a community organizer with Black Lives Matter Alliance Broward. And of course, as in the name, we're based in Broward County and do a lot of our work in the Black communities throughout Broward County. And yeah, I've been with the organization for a little bit over 5 years.
Appreciate it. 5 years. That goes nowadays, well, it goes by fast, but a very long time, right? Mm-hmm. And you brought somebody with you today. Can you introduce them, or can you have them introduce them?
Yeah, this is LaCandice Reed, and I'll have her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is LaCandice Reed. Most call me Candy. I'm the CEO and founder of Girls with Scars, Inc. My pronouns are we, she, her. I live a transparent life, helping people understand that their past doesn't dictate their future, and I do it in a transparent way.
I like that. Love it. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for coming today again, and thank you for having this discussion with us. And so we're going to jump right in. But first, I want to ask just a broad question to each and every one of you. How did each and every one of you get involved in organizing or being an activist? What does organizing an activist mean? So we could explain to the audience. You can jump in.
So I could go. So it's very interesting, the timing of this conversation, because I got activated really this time 8 years ago when George Zimmerman was acquitted of killing Trayvon Martin. And, we had a conversation. I talked about this a little bit earlier with some of the organizers of this panel discussion. Trayvon Martin, and it kind of sucks to say this, his death didn't actually activate me to become an activist or organizer, because when it happened, I was attending UCF as a student, and it was about 20 minutes north of my school. But I was like, oh no, the justice system is going to work itself out. George Zimmerman, he's going to be guilty. I had complete faith in the criminal justice system, so I didn't doubt it. So like, I really did not even attend. There was protests happening every single day. I didn't even attend them back then, because I'm like, justice is going to work itself out. And honestly, the next year, that in July, and I remember the day like it was yesterday, when George Zimmerman was acquitted, that's when I finally realized. I was like, oh, the justice system is working by design when they acquitted George Zimmerman. And that's what really kind of activated my journey. And that's when I first attended a protest. It was done by Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and Dream Defenders on my campus. And I remember holding a protest sign for the first time. I still have that photo, and I look back at it frequently, because that was my first time where I was just like, oh, I have to be an active agent in changing what went on, because I was just so upset by that. And so I remember that. And then exactly 3 years after that, that's when I actually co-organized my first protest with the Alliance. And it was around the time right after Philando Castile and Alton Sterling were killed on a national level. And then on a local level, of the case that people were talking about at that time were Jermaine McBean, who was killed in July of 2013 in Broward County by the Broward Sheriff officers. And so 800 people attended that action. And that's when I made a decision to myself of like, oh, I'm committing myself to do this for the rest of my life. So that's kind of how I got activated.
I guess I'll chime in since we're together. I've been an organizer, but I didn't know I was an organizer until my brother was killed. And how do I explain this is I was always putting together community events, back to school bazaars, father-son kick, but whatever you can think of that brings community love and unity, I did it. And I thought I was doing a great job. When things would happen to people, I would show up, I would march, I would bring waters, I would this, but I wouldn't be consistent. When it happened in my backyard, when it happened to my brother, and me and my son was left with nothing, and then I couldn't get no help, I realized then that I had to step up. I had to become a voice for the justice. I couldn't be quiet anymore. I couldn't not do this, because it's really a problem. So I would say in 2018, it's been a go for me, and it's going to stay a go for me, because our voices are needed.
Absolutely. They absolutely are. And yeah, we all need to be on go. And thank you for sharing those stories with us. And Genesis, you can share as well if you'd like to.
Yes, thank you. So my path has been a little bit different. I actually got my start. My longtime mentor, Derek Henry, was running for city council here in Daytona Beach, and he asked me to come on board and help out with his campaign. And when we were out in the field volunteering and talking to neighbors and friends, I really sensed the apathy that a lot of folks felt in terms of how government was working and the fact that it wasn't producing results for them. And so I felt that if we all would get engaged and be involved and hold our elected officials accountable, that we could see a change. And so I did just that. I got involved, sat on some city boards, was appointed to several different boards and things like that. Continued to do some volunteer work. And so we began to have small victories, small wins. At that point, I went on to FAMU in Tallahassee, where I studied political science, interned within the state legislature, and then moved to DC and started my career in public service, where I worked as a legislative assistant in the U.S. Congress. And so my background is a little bit more, government, actually within government, but I do recognize the tremendous power of collectively organizing to churn out a result that you want from government. And so connected with Equal Ground, and we've been in Florida throughout the entire state of Florida organizing, but specifically in Volusia County, Orange County, Pinellas, and Seminole County, where we have active presence and paid field staff organizing in those different communities.
Right. And organizing and activism has been going on forever. Right. I mean, it's the way a collective gets heard. So, I've started, back in 2008 in the same way. Didn't know I was a organizer or an activist. Somebody had to kind of identify me as that. But it's a way for a collective voice to get heard. And I want to thank you too, Genesis, for sharing that. And David, you can flip to the next slide as we jump into a little more of the conversation, deeper into the conversation that you have. So we're looking at Black Lives Matter and the social justice in Florida, and where has the right to protest gotten us, and what is our path moving forward? And we could kind of blanket answer that, and then I could jump into some more questions. But what does it look like moving forward, Tiffany, from what we've seen in the past couple of years here, to be honest?
So that's a complicated question, right? Because if folks are familiar with the past legislative session, you have DeSantis, who passes HB1, which is an anti-protesting bill in order to invoke fear with people who've built a lot of traction locally in Florida and across the nation, pre and post George Floyd, right? So you currently see that, groups like the Black Lives Matter Alliance, Broward, Dream Defenders, and the Black Collective with the NAACP and other partners filing a lawsuit saying that, that HB1 pretty much violates our basic human rights, right? And our constitutional rights as well, too. So you see people still being resilient, right? Taking to the streets, even in a post HB1 world. We still decided to protest here locally because we know that, like what you said, like protesting has been like a root, like, like in our country, like in a country that was built on white supremacy and racism. Protesting is our birthright, and something that we firmly believe in doing. And so when we think about that, it has been pivotal in getting the changes that we want to see. It was even pivotal in why DeSantis became reactionary and passed HB1, an anti-protesting bill, because if something wasn't so dynamic and working, you wouldn't have to pass a bill to kind of stop it from happening. So you see a lot of attacks on protesting. You see a wave of people who've gotten more activated in knowing a bunch of demands directly from families that have been impacted by police violence and people who have been working against police violence for a long time. So you see a lot of those things gaining a lot of traction, people understanding what next steps to take through people hitting the streets. And you see a lot of protesters and a lot of organizers becoming more strategic in how to plan safe actions, even in the state of Florida, where there's a lot of bills and a lot of regulations that are stopping people from fighting for their basic rights.
Right, and with this local government that we have so many more new added in derivatives into legislation to keep our voices muted. And so I'm glad you brought up some of those topics. That's a perfect segue to go to the next slide, David. And I'll throw the mic over to Bernice and ask you, Bernice, we could touch on some of these policies or the Policing Act, HB1, if you could talk about some of these things that would introduce into legislation, some of the specifics, if you don't mind, Bernice.
Yeah, so I can definitely share about HB1, and then I can go through the key parts of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. So HB1 was just a bill that was recently passed that actually took away a lot of our civil rights by saying a lot of different things, like, for example, declaring certain protests like actually a mob, or there's like a new form of interaction with folks that's called mob intimidation, which is if a group of 3 or more people tries to convince you of something. So a lot of it is like very vague as well. But there's a lot of it that's specifically made, obviously, as a reaction to the Black Lives Matter movement, because this law didn't exist before George Floyd and like the uprisings that we saw come from that. So that's HB1. And then to talk about the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2021, David, if you could go to the next slide. So this is an act that was actually passed by the House in March. And here are some of the key provisions. First, it lowers criminal intent standard for conviction of a law enforcement officer. Next, it limits qualified immunity as a defense to liability in private civil actions against police officers. It also creates a national police misconduct registry and establishes new reporting requirements. And lastly, it creates universal standards for police training, especially on racial bias. This is key, and duty to intervene against other officers in using excessive force. So, like, I'd love to hear, maybe firstly from Genesis, like, how do you feel about like HB1 and the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, and just your thoughts on those policies?
Yeah, so I think HB1 is terrible. It's so terrible, in fact, that during this past legislative session, Equal Ground worked extensively to ensure that we were informing our community of what was happening, and the fact that this was something that was that had a very real possibility of being passed. And unfortunately, our advocacy was not able to stop this bill, and it's still passed. But this summer, we're still out. We're educating our community, letting them know about the different changes that took place with HB1 as well as SB 90. And, we're trying to empower folks to take action. First we're educating folks, and then secondly, we're empowering them to take action and do something about it. And so, like I said, throughout the legislative session, we created what was like a toolkit. And we emailed out to our partners and folks who signed up to our email list, as well as did speaking tours. We, like I said, informed folks about these changes. But then also we prepared sample tweets. We prepared sample text messages, emails, and just really provided the resources for folks to take ownership of fighting back against these type of policies and bills, because we know that they were created, like you said earlier, in direct response to our organizing and our advocacy. And so we're trying to do our part to push back against bills like HB1 and SB 90, because we just know that they're terrible. As for the George Floyd and Policing Act, I think it is good legislation that could be made better, but I think it's a start. And I am in favor of seeing that pass, and hopefully we can continue to see movement in a positive direction in terms of accountability for law enforcement.
Right, and when we talk about HB1 too, we're all in this space to where we organize, we're in the field, meaning that we're at the doors, we're throwing events, we're at rallies, we're at the in front of the governor's office or the senator's office. And so it's in the back of our mind all the time now with this new legislation, like, hey, can I get mowed over? Can somebody feel so empowered to hurt us because of the rhetoric, not only that they see on TV, but by legislation, quite frankly, that's passed by some of these far right governors and senators and Congress. I know, Genesis, definitely want to get to you on this. How do you you see all this? You guys are at the forefront in the field when it comes to especially policing. Black Lives Matter is always kind of stigmatized. We definitely want to give you the space to talk about some of these provisions, what you guys see, what you intel, and some of the local things that you guys are doing and what you see implemented locally and see working there as well. So I want to give you your space.
Yeah, so again, for us, it's just really a matter of education, right? Like it's in our name, Equal Ground Education, right? And so we're out just really making folks aware and conscious of the fact that these things are happening, because believe it or not, a lot of folks are not aware that a lot of these things are taking place. And so we sort of see our role in, one, educating folks, but then also empowering folks to do something about some of these things that are taking place. We talk about we talk about HB1 a lot, and we're talking about the George Floyd and Policing Act. But one of the things that also happened in Florida this year was a bill that was passed was SB 90, and that dealt specifically with voting. And so the only reason that I'm bringing that up is because we recognize and we understand that in a democracy, right, like one of the most powerful tools that you have to effectuate change is your vote. And so what we see is them trying to make it harder for folks to be able to access the ballot box, whether that be new restrictions on requesting a vote by mail ballot, whether that be restrictions on folks being able to turn in their ballot with the so-called ballot harvesting or elimination of drop boxes and things like that. And so not only are we educating, but we're getting into the game. We are one of 3 lawsuits that is currently out there suing the state of Florida, where we've teamed up with other plaintiffs to say that this is unconstitutional. And so we're not really sure what this process will look like. We know that it will be a lengthy process. We're in it for the long haul, but we know that we have a responsibility to stand up and fight back and push back against some of these draconian laws that are being passed in our state. And Bernice made a point earlier, and I just wanted to kind of chime in on that or build upon that. And Tiffany as well. The decision to move forward with actions and to move forward with protests is a very serious one that a lot of folks must really think about, because we're talking about the potential for folks' lives to be altered forever if they go to jail or get a criminal record. And so I think there's an opportunity here for us to organize even within that space, right? Like, what does it look like for us to fundraise and get money ready for folks who may go to jail for bail? What does it look like for us to identify a team of attorneys who can assist pro bono? And so we have to kind of figure out ways to work around these roadblocks and parameters that they're putting in place, and not just give in and say, we can't do anything, because that's ultimately what they want. They want us to give in. They want us to stop fighting. And so we have to get creative and find ways that we can continue to engage.
We do, and absolutely, and I'm gonna come back to that. Actually, we're gonna talk to some policies like cash bail, but definitely, but we must have Tiffany speak. When I look at the scheme of organizing, I often look at you guys as the infantry. So you guys are there, and we are always seeing you guys. Black Lives Matter, and I know you guys are Black Lives Matter. Of the Broward Alliance, but we're always seeing the stigmatization of Black Lives Matter. And what is the cause? What are you really out here for? What are you doing? So I'm going to let you answer that. And also, what do you see when you see the Policing Act, the current agenda that's set forward? What's good about it? What would you guys like to see changed about it? What are you looking for? And I definitely love that you're here, and thank you again. So go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. I think the biggest stigma that we do have to get over, and the narrative that's written about the movement, especially like in like the media, sometimes it's like kind of like what you said, is like a lot of times it's those people that are yelling in the streets. They have no real clear goals. They have no clear aims. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. We know that a lot of people get activated through protesting, right? That's usually like their first entry into the movement, right? Attend an action, and we're well aware of that a lot of our own self have gotten activated through protesting, and so we look at it as a sacred and a cherished act to continue building people up, right, and building leadership, and we know that us just yelling in the streets is not the correct narrative about ourselves, right? And so we do our best to speak our own narrative, to make sure that people are trained in how to speak to media, that we're writing op-eds, so our narrative gets shared just as much as the counter narrative about us. And we know from a lot of the work that we did, even post and pre-George Floyd, after George Floyd, we had over 400 people attend commission meetings around some of our demands, which is reimagining public safety and what would it look like to divest money from police departments and then reinvest it into things that keep our communities safe, like affordable housing, mental health support, and paying people a livable wage, and addressing homelessness issues. And so those are the things that we had people send emails about to their commissioners as well too. So we have people attending commission meetings, people going to budget meetings, and all type of stuff. So we know how to activate people beyond yelling and chanting in the streets, which we think is, again, a sacred act. We get people to also take next steps and to continue their action and to continue their work into fighting for liberation for Black people.
Awesome. I know you gave an interesting analogy when we spoke yesterday, and I loved it. And we also talked about some of the terminology used and how people that take one thing and run with it. And so, I want to talk about some of these things. Again, I know some people may feel uncomfortable with it. We do need to have the discussion. So when we're talking about, we were talking about when Black Lives Matter goes and says we want to defund the police, or, and you guys are stigmatized as being they're radical and they just want martial law. What are we looking at when we hear these things?
So a couple of things. So one of my favorite quotes is from Angela Davis, and it says that radical just means grabbing something at the root. So I love the word radical because that just means that we're going literally to the actual core of the problem and addressing it from there, right? And then you said something else too, like defund the police. Defund the police is not a dirty phrase, right? And one thing that I kind of consider myself is like spreading the defund the police gospel, because when we say that, it's actually, well, that term and that phrase comes from a place of like radical love, right? Which just means like, true and the most genuine and authentic form of love, of saying that if we know that policing is an $80 billion a year industry and nothing else gets funded except for mass incarceration, which is a $100 billion industry, nothing else gets funded like those things. Not public education, not affordable housing, not Medicare for all. So all we're saying is not mental health support for people who need it. All we're saying is that we just want to reallocate money to things that have been historically and scientifically proven through research to keep our communities more safe, right? Because that's always the issue, right? Is how do we keep people more safe? So why don't we actually fund the things that are proven to do so and reallocate money from things that has been proven to actually continue harming our people, like innocent people being killed by the police. That's not justice. That's not safety, right? So how do we have new conversations and open up our minds about completely reimagining what public safety looks like? And a lot of that looks like defunding the police.
For sure. And you also mentioned something that Fort Lauderdale was implementing that you seem to said was groundbreaking, the way that they were advancing towards the community, engaging the community.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to talk about that. So currently right now, me and LaCandice and a couple of other organizers, we're working directly with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department to lead a focus group. And this group is working to implement a program that reroutes all non-violent and non-criminal calls. So this is like somebody calling about a noise complaint, somebody calling in regards to like a homelessness issue, somebody who is maybe suffering from a drug overdose. Instead of those calls being routed to the police department that might show up with a gun and not de-escalate a situation, we're looking at the likelihood of implementing a program like Cahoots in Eugene, Oregon, or the CALL program that's in St. Petersburg, Florida, which has already implemented similar things about rerouting nonviolent and non-criminal calls, and instead have a mental health professional show up, and a mental health professional and a medical professional like an EMT or a nurse both show up to the scene of the crime, not in a uniform, in plain clothing, and be able to support people who are having those issues. And police officers, especially at the FLPD, they're even saying like, there's a lot of calls where we're overwhelmed. We want to see them actually be rerouted to something else. So we see a lot of good energy from police officers and community members, as well as folks that are in our group in the Alliance Girls with Scars, et cetera, who are really trying to work in collaboration and coalition with each other to move something like this forward. So it's really in the research and planning stages, but we're looking forward to actually have it be implemented And like I said earlier, it will be something, there's nothing like it in South Florida. So if a program like this is implemented with the Fort Lauderdale Police Department, it could really be a trailblazer and set the tone for other police departments in South Florida and across the state of Florida as well too.
And it also kind of attests to the leadership, the community leadership that Black Lives Matter has. So, you know, I want to thank you for sharing that. And me as an organizer and a Black man, definitely know that the Policing Act as it is, it could definitely have some more. We know that the systematic issue has been for far too long. And it's a human rights issue, and it's a pandemic, to be honest with you. So that being said, David, how important is it for our governors and senators to sign off, our local governors and senators to sign off on the Policing Act, to get something moving, to show progress? You know, people are in need. So how important is this them to be active?
Yeah, sure. This was something I was commenting on earlier, was that I mean, the reason why we really brought this up specifically is this is legislation that has passed the House, and so it is on a journey, and it's a journey of police reform, and so there's lots of ways that we can improve, and we're seeing some of them here. And I think one of the bigger ones that I always want to come back to and highlight is the limitation of qualified immunity in civil suits. And I think that's when people don't see justice served in a criminal court, they take it upon themselves to remedy in a civil action. And that has been denied for a very long time. And this is something that would bring that change. And then, you know, who really knows, but maybe when people realize that, oh, I'm no longer protected against this, I could lose a lot of money personally, like my pension, essentially. Maybe we'll see a change in incentives, a change in behavior. And so that's something that, if passed, that becomes implemented, that becomes law, and hopefully that becomes progress. And I just, we see that, that's a federal level issue, but here in Florida, we certainly see that, the tide has gone in opposite directions, where we've seen HB1 and SB 90 go in the direction of limiting it. So I think, we're looking at policy getting implemented, and a policy proposal potentially getting implemented. And so, activism, being out, speaking out is one thing. Being active and being cognizant and being consistently a voter is really something that is going to make a difference long term. And I wanted to bring that up, and of course, mention the work that Genesis, that we had spoken about, that when it comes to legislative victories, and with the background that you mentioned, like what role does voting play, or what is the toolkit that we have in accomplishing and seeing progressive change, or improvements and the issues that we're talking about.
Yeah. So, I don't want to be the guy to say that voting is the end all be all, right? Because we all know that it's not. Right. But I think that we have to recognize it for what it is. And I think I said this earlier, being the most important tool that we have in a democracy. And so, when I was a staffer in Washington, D.C., I got a chance to meet the late John Lewis, the great late John Lewis, and, be in his presence several times. And so one of the things that he used to always say is never grow tired in doing good. Never grow tired in doing good. And so I think that's really the mindset that we have to approach this work with, right? Like, we're going to have losses. We're going to have days where we don't win. This past legislative session, we took a lot of L's. But sometimes if we organize and we agitate and we, speak up enough and make sure that we're organizing our community, we can lessen the damage, right? So if I may take a moment here, when SB 90 was first presented, in its original form, it was a super, super, super terrible bill. The end result is still bad, but it was much worse originally, right? And so Equal Ground, one of the things that we did is we pulled the bill sponsor into a room, and we, had a conversation with him to really understand his motivations behind doing what he did in terms of introducing that very bad bill. And so through working with him, through agitation, we did a community town hall where we were able to amplify the stories of folks who were directly impacted by this proposed legislation. And so in the end result was far less toxic than it originally was. And so for us, that was a win, right? Like, I mean, obviously we couldn't stop the bill from moving forward, but in the state of Florida, which is controlled by the GOP for the last 25 years, it's really not much that you can stop when they are in total control. And so that has happened because over the years, we have neglected to really show up in a way, in a consistent way, to demand accountability. And so here we have an opportunity in the state to continue to show up. As many folks know, we're getting ready to enter the redistricting process. We are helping to, sort of steer that ship and, ensure that it's transparent and that the legislators are adhering to the Fair Districts amendments that voters overwhelmingly voted for in 2010. And so I'm hopeful that we have an opportunity here to redraw our maps, our legislative maps, to get more parity, to have the maps actually reflect what this state looks like, and they're not gerrymandered to serve the politicians. And so I'm hopeful that if we continue to organize, if we continue to register folks to vote and really alert folks to what's going on. Like, I think when you tell people that there's a politician in Tallahassee or in Washington looking to do X, Y, or Z, I think that really does something to activate and wake them up in a way. And so we have to continue to go out and, tell folks what's happening. And so, that's what we're going to continue to do with Equal Ground and working with our partners to try to make a difference.
Love it. And on the other, I'm looking at the panel when I'm looking at everybody here. I just see, the circle of life per se when it comes to what we do, right? So you have, the people to get out the vote, and how important it is to vote. But I want to reiterate how important it is to have protest as well. And so, Tiff, we want to also reopen it to you to tell us how important it is to make sure, like, HB1 doesn't control how protesting is done and how important it is to protest.
Yeah, and one of the things I could say, and I forgot who said this yesterday, when it goes down in history, you'll always see that people were fighting against HB1. We went up, me, LaCandice, and a couple other folks from the Alliance went up at the beginning of session and at the end of session, and we spoke at committee meetings, and each time it was always 40 plus people speaking at the two meetings that we attended against HB1, and nobody spoke in favor of it. So you could really see how people at the top force this thing through, but people who were really grassroots on the ground protesting throughout the state were always activated and mobilizing people to Tallahassee, and we protest even up there against HB1 with community partners across the entire state. And so that's one thing that, even though this anti-protesting bill has passed, I always know that community came together and fought back against it. And so even when you think about, like, a lot of the instances of police violence that still doesn't have justice on a local level, is reassuring the families that we're still going to fight, right? We had our 1-year anniversary of our May 31st protest, where we had 3,000 people in downtown Fort Lauderdale. And instead we decided to do kind of like a Black Joy celebration in a park in Sistrunk. And so we had a DJ, we had music. And so we know that, again, protesting is is our birthright, and it doesn't always look like us being in the streets. It could be us being in community together, sharing music that, you know, makes us feel good, and then having conversations about how do we continue to move forward even in an HB1 world. So we're still getting together, we're protesting in different ways, and celebrating in community in different ways of all of our wins. So we know we're keeping the energy going forward, say that, you know, this bill doesn't stop us. It just is giving us more opportunities to be creative on how we really still protest, but in different ways.
Big facts, big facts. Thank you so much. And I want to say something real quick to the audience. There's so many layers to this discussion that we can have. I encourage you to, place your questions in chat if you do have any questions. But also, if you'd like to see a part 2 of this discussion, please let us know. We'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to have this panel back. We are running out of time, so I do want to open up a space to give everybody the opportunity to do their calls for action. What your organization is going to be doing in the next couple of weeks to get everybody involved, to get everybody activated, to get everybody excited about just getting their voices heard. I'll throw it. Anybody could jump in if they want to.
Yeah, so I wanted to first and foremost thank you all for allowing and providing this space for us to come and talk about this very important issue. You can visit us online at www.equalground-education.com and get connected with us, to sign up for our toolkits that we provide during legislative session. To sign up for the latest information about what's going on in the community and throughout the state. We're actually, like I said earlier, in the process of getting ready to go through redistricting. And so we're part of the Redistricting Coalition, which will be training and educating folks throughout the entire state about what redistricting is and the importance of redistricting. And so we're always in need of folks to join us in this fight and join us in this work, because we know that the more folks we have in the fight, the easier it is to lift that load. And so I thank you all again for providing this opportunity to invite us to share the work that we're doing and to have the opportunity to have this conversation. Thank you.
Hey y'all, I wanted to jump in and share Tuesday, July 27th. We have a activist strategy session that I'm really, really excited about. It's going to be a statewide event, and really we're going to be talking about how can we actually defeat Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis. And so that'll be the 27th at 7 p.m. And give us just a second and we'll drop a registration link for you for that.
Yeah, that's what for our future. That's what me, David, and Bernice. Please show up. Y'all come to the event. It's gonna be nice. We've made a whole workshop, a whole strategy session that we know you guys will love. We love to hear your input. We love to get you involved. And we know it'll be a good time. Just wanted to piggyback on that, Bernice. Sorry about that.
Okay, cool. I'll go. So the Alliance, we have our monthly meetings every single month where we build up our skills and tools to keep on fighting the good fight. So our monthly meetings are every last Monday of the month. So not this upcoming Monday, the following one at 7 p.m. We're currently deciding whether we're going to do it in person or keep it virtual. We've been having our meetings virtual for a little bit over a year and a year and a half since the beginning of COVID. So we'll have more information on that, and you can follow us on social media. You can find us by typing in Black Lives Matter Alliance Broward. We were tagged on this live, so you could find us there on Facebook, and then on Instagram we're BLM Alliance Broward, and on Twitter we're at BLM_Broward. So we're on most social media platforms. We're trying to recruit for younger people who love the TikTok, if they want to start our TikTok page and stuff like that. We're trying to be everywhere that people are virtually in a pandemic world to get the information out. So we're definitely inviting people to really commit to the fight with us, with any of the community partners that are on here as well. Because one thing about it, like in order to see true change, you have to be consistent. And the only way to be consistent is to, I feel like, be in community with like-minded people. So yeah, we definitely will want people to continue even after this conversation.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you again. I want to thank everybody again for joining us with this discussion. Again, the audience, David, Bernice, Tiffy, Genesis, thank you so much for being here. And I'll leave you guys with this. You know, imagine if you didn't have to live paycheck to paycheck. In the call there for my dad. You hear me? Back? Yeah. Dad.
And
but
also,
imagine
sorry,
if you didn't have to live, right? Dads.
Could I make a quick shout
but
out?
imagine if you didn't have to live paycheck to paycheck in Florida. Imagine if the government listened to what we needed in the time of COVID and responded quickly. Imagine if Black men didn't have to get shot down in the street by the police anymore. You know, I could imagine that, but it's just a shame that there's a time frame on that. So when you go home today, before you reach out with your eyes closed and your heart open, take time to say their names. Say it, because we all know that Black Lives Matter. I want to thank you guys again for coming out, and we'll see you again. Have a good one.
Thank you.